Welcome to CAREER22, a series of videos about the skills we need for a career in the 22nd century. My name is Miguel.
And I am Milton.
And we are both founders of Ungap Education and both university professors as well. The reason we are doing these videos is because, after several years teaching and helping our students to kickstart their careers, we realized that this is one of the most critical and stressful processes in their lives. And it was creating a lot of anxiety. So that's why we decided to bring you this series of learnings about how to start your career, in a meaningful way. So we have covered several topics, but we have today a different one, right, Milton? What is the topic?
So today we're talking about this idea of sense-making, and sense-making in opposition to decision-making when it comes to your career. We see that many people approach their careers as in a very rational process of making very precise decisions about which step they should take next. And what we see from our own personal experience, but also with when working with other people and in coaching as well, is that career making is far more about sense making, of building this map of reality and learning from that map and evolving basically your picture of how your life can unfold. And this is based on the work of a well-known scholar called Carl Weick, that did a lot of research in terms of how is it that people and managers go about decision-making in their organizations. And he realized that their decisions were not as rational as people might think they are, but they're far more contextual and far more enacted within the reality they find themselves in. And it's far more about creating an evolving map, making sense of reality as you progress. So it's far more about the process rather than the end decision itself. And we think that this applies very well also to the context of our careers. We are in an evolving process of understanding how our life unfolds, and we need to embrace that attitude more rather than a very rigid sort of decision-making framework.
Okay, so this is kind of an improvisation, or you consider that something different, or gut feeling, or even gut feeling, right? So
I would. It's a good point you say that. I think it's sort of a disciplined, smart way of improvising, right? Is improvising with a plan. It's like not improvising on thin air. It's actually improvising on a tangible plan that you have, but that plan changes. And Carl Weick actually refers to an interesting story about this sort of group of a military detachment that was in the Alps that was lost in a military exercise, and suddenly one of the soldiers realizes that he has a map of the mountains, and with that map they are able to find their final the base camp where they were supposed to go to, and then the head of that military base camp was very impressed with how they were able to find their way back home. And he asked for the map, and he realized that the map was from the Pyrenees and not from the Alps. And so the story basically goes that it's better to have some form of map, even if the map is wrong, than having no map at all. And of course, the soldiers had to improvise and navigate their way back home based on a wrong map, but the wrong map had a multiple benefits. One was that it allowed them to get hope. It allowed people to get confidence, to focus their efforts, and also to have a reference point from which they could have a sense of their reality. And this is what sense making is about. You have a map, you make assumptions about the world, and then from that point you act upon it and you start learning about it, and in that process you're able to converge. And that's exactly what we're trying to say here about sense making. You need to have a career goal, but don't be overly obsessed with that goal in a way. It serves as a way of steering your energy, but you will need to adapt and learn along the way, right? So it's like that old saying from John Lennon, right? So life is what happens to you while you're busy making plans. The plans are still important, but they're just a sort of a means to an end, not the end itself.
Cool. And gut feeling, how do you see that against the gut feeling? So I understand that it's not like totally improvising on, like a free ride. But is it about just following gut feeling and completely out of, rationality or
No, I
sense?
think, yeah,
Has
the
it?
rationality is an important aspect of it. Absolutely. So you need to think about the assumptions you're making, about what's happening to you, and your gut is an important instrument to tell you how it feels, right? And if things feel right or don't feel so right, you should pay attention to that and try to understand what does that mean. It probably, as you progress and you become older and more experienced, that gut is basically your instrument of incorporating that experience somehow unconsciously in how you react to things, and is able to guide you somehow. So your gut feeling develops. And it's also to give you early signs of how you might want to steer and change things in a way that are more consistent. So these two need to go hand in hand, right? So your gut and your analytical thinking should work together, and they're not independent. And the more attention you pay to your guts, the more you
Yeah.
can fine tune your strategy.
Cool. So can we think about examples on how sense making applies to career? Perhaps some examples on how to actually sense making did a difference on someone's
Yeah.
life.
Well, maybe I'll start with my own professional life and my career. I mean, if I look back at where I was about 20 something years ago, and what I envisioned for my future, I saw it very much as becoming a senior executive in a large corporation eventually one day, maybe a CEO, international career. And here I am now, a professor at university, right? So that couldn't be more distant, I guess, compared to where I was at that time. But still, if I look back, that map, that ambition of becoming a CEO and a senior executive allowed me to enter corporate life, to learn from the fields, and that is very important in where I stand today as a professor, with that practical experience and practical knowledge that allows me to relate to that in a far more interesting way than just from a distance, right? So it's an ever evolving goal, and now I think I have a better picture of where I want to be. But that map was for me fundamental, even when it was wrong.
Yeah.
So another good example that I think we can share is like, and we see this across the board, is like, for instance, from um, uh, uh, executives that halfway through their careers realize that they want to do something else, and maybe a burnout happens or a child is born, and suddenly you start reinventing your life and your goals. And just yesterday, we had an interview with an entrepreneur that's similar to what I said. For a long time, wanted to become a CEO of a global multinational, and then went into strategy consulting, did all the correct steps to get into that path, and suddenly realized that maybe he was on the wrong path, also because of a burnout and because his first daughter was born, and then realized that maybe he wanted to do something else, and had to readjust his strategy, and eventually became an entrepreneur. And he was telling us that initial map of becoming the CEO of a large established global multinational, he never achieved it, if you want, but it was fundamental for him to get to where he is today from a learning perspective rather than a failure that he will achieve that. So we see many examples like this. And maybe, Miguel, you also have examples of your own that you could share.
Yeah, well, I mean, now that you were actually mentioning that example, I think resonated with me as well. Not only mine, but many people that I see that perhaps in the beginning are more focused on achieving certain objective, and it's kind of a goal driven career. I want to be this, I want to be that, right? And then along the way they understand that probably it's not about getting that goal, but it's actually working on the things that allowed you theoretically to reach that goal. And that's what actually made more sense to them, that the meaning came more on the journey than on the destination. So for me, exactly that was that. I was working in a corporate world abroad, living in Mexico for a big multinational in the fast-moving consumer goods, and suddenly I understood it's not about what I'm achieving; it's what I'm experiencing.
Yeah,
And then I've totally focused my career on, okay, so how can I refocus more than the job, more than the career track, more on the skills I want to develop, on the impact I want to actually be working in. So that changed a lot, the way I found at least sense and
yeah,
purpose and meaning in what I was doing and what I was planning to do.
absolutely. Yeah, and actually, if you allow me, just this is exactly what sense making is, right? It's like you have this map, you have this goal, and you're steering towards that goal, but you are, of course, learning along the way. So the learning is key for you
Yeah.
to be able to understand, does the map still make sense? Do I need to adjust anything? What do I need to learn to make, to evolve and to develop myself, right? If I failed, why did I fail? Or what can I learn from that? Or how do I need to readjust my goals accordingly? And this also refers back to the other two videos we did on the possibility mindsets and the importance of reflection. And those two aspects are critical for you to be able to have a career that makes sense while not necessarily being always exactly right on course, as we like to say.
Yeah. What about some practical tips that we can actually give to people? Some hacks on how to do this sense making, because it's conceptual and it's not always easy to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, in these things, sometimes indeed, and maybe that's a professional sort of handicap, if you want, is that sometimes we over conceptualize things, but it's not that complicated actually, right? If you think about sense making and you want to make it very practical and when applied to your career, you could start off by saying, okay, where do I want to be in 10 years, right? And that's a very fair exercise to do. What would be my long-term vision? I wouldn't go more than 10 years because it might be just too much of daydreaming. But like
Mhm.
in 10 years, what would be my beacon, right? I would like to be there.
I
Okay.
would, I would say even 10 is a lot, right?
Yeah. So you can even make it shorter. And if that's the case, you need to break it down into smaller chunks. All right. If that's 10 years, it probably means 3 jobs, right? To get there, assuming that every job takes about 3 to 4 years. What sort of jobs would it take me to get to that position, or assignments or projects or tasks or experiences? And if you look at the CVs of other people, how they achieve what they achieved and got to where they got, you can see what sort of steps they took. And then, okay, you need to break it down even into smaller parts. All right. If this means that in the next 3 or 4 years, I need to have this type of experiences. Okay, what is in the next 3 months? What sort of small experiences or small projects or small initiatives or concrete actions I can take in the next 3 months that can contribute towards that 3-year objective? So these are sprints. We like to call it sprints, right? So it's like little experiences you can run that are somehow contributing towards that longer term vision, but they're very actionable, they're very concrete, and you can work on it immediately, on that same day. Once you define that smaller 3-month sort of assignment for the next, for the coming period, the next step, of course, is to immerse yourself fully into it. Make a little map, a little sort of in sense making style, make a map of what that means, what are the assumptions behind that, what do you need to learn, who do you need to talk to, etc., etc. And after 3 months, once you're fully immersed into it, you look back. All right, this is what I thought I would do. This is what I thought I would be learning. This is what I thought I would be achieving. How much did I actually achieve? You know, what were the assumptions that I made that were not maybe totally right? What do I need to revise about my next assignment the next 3 months, still in light with that sort of larger plan? And of course, sometimes things change so dramatically that you might need to revise the entire plan, but that's not so frequent if you want. But you need to keep on revisiting your plan, we would say every 3 months, right? And chunks of 3 months so that you can make it actionable and tangible.
Okay, so rather than having big plans, you break it down in short sprints, like 3 months to career tour of duty in order to grow to the next level. That's great. Thank you. I was listening to you and also say that I see also a lot of mistakes, and that can also be interesting to talk about. One of the mistakes I see about coming up with a map, right, is that people tend to obsess about the destination and they forget about the journey. A career destination is one thing, but I think we have to work on the journey, and we have to make choices not on the career destination, but on the career steps. And probably I think a good metaphor for that is the sports metaphor. Rather than, of course, you have this long-term vision for becoming whatever, but then you have to work on the muscles, or work on the aspects of your ability in order to reach that. And perhaps you should train, and on each sprint that you were mentioning, you should train or develop each one of the muscles, each one of the aspects of your game. And perhaps you start by, I'm going to work on the basics, on the technique. So I want to choose my first tour of duty, my first sprint, to work on the basics. And I will forget a little bit the rest. And working on the basics on first will allow me, perhaps you have to do 2 or 3 or more sprints on that, but you're really focusing on excelling on certain aspects of your game. Then after, you go for another aspect of your game, and by actually training, you will be able to grow towards your long-term vision, right? I think that is another good practical hack.
I guess just a quick note there, because I worked with many senior executives and people, heads of talent in large corporations, and that's one thing they emphasize very much, what you're saying, right? They dislike very much when their talents become overly obsessed with the next job and don't spend enough time thinking about their current job. How can I be better? How can I develop this muscle? How can I improve my skills? Because if you focus on that, the results will follow and they will speak for themselves and opportunities will come. So being obsessively career-minded in terms of your next step might actually work against you, right? So what you're saying is absolutely right, even in corporate life, right? So that's a very important message.
Cool.
You were saying.
Yeah. So another hack that you can think of that you want to share with us?
Maybe instead of a hack, maybe I will think of something you should avoid. And I speak from my own experience. In a way, it's a hack as well, by not doing what I sometimes did, which is to be too harsh on myself. Sometimes you get a bit frustrated by not achieving certain targets, by not having it right, by not knowing what the next step will be. And I think that I've learned the most also from entrepreneurs, and I think this entrepreneurial mindset is very applicable to career life, is that they fail so many times, and every time they fail, they don't take it too hard on themselves, right? It's okay to fail, and failing is part of the process and the learning, and you are able to forgive yourself for the mistakes you make, and to let go. And that's something that I especially in the beginning of my career, didn't do enough. I was a bit harsh on myself, and I kind of punished myself too much mentally about my lack of certainty, about my lack of clarity, about not achieving the targets I had in mind for myself. And I learned from entrepreneurs that it's okay, it's all right. I mean, we're all humans, and you just accept it and let go. That would be also my recommendation there, for you to forgive yourself.
Yeah, so sense making is also about failing but learning
Yeah.
without taking so many pressure
Yeah.
on yourself. Great. I think we've covered a very interesting topic to sense making and as a critical skill for crafting your career for the 22nd century. Thank you very much. It was a very, very, very enlightening conversation. So
Thank you, Miguel.
let's go. See you
See you.
soon.
Take
Thank
care. Huh?
you.
Cheers.
Thanks.